Hey there, this is Seth Schaefer from Team Just Cause Robotics. Today's video will be an event recap from Motorama Robot Conflict 2020. I was competing in 2 weight classes, Divisten in the 3-pound Beetleweight class, and a new bot, Draconid, in the 12-pound Hobbyweight class. Draconid was completely untested in battle and has a lot of firsts for me. It's my first nearly all CNC machined bot, my first time using dual weapon motors, my first time using brushless drive, my first horizontal spinner bot. It uses a fully 3D printed drivetrain consisting entirely of off-the-shelf hardware, bearings, and O-rings, and fully 3D printed weapon system pulleys. No P60s here. Divisten was the same bot we all know and love from January's Norwalk event, with the addition of a new asymmetric disc, which I discussed in detail in my 2 spinner tutorial videos. I'll link that recap below as well. I used black alloy 910 to reprint many of the nylon parts, including slightly bigger smooth weapon pulleys, and switched to plastite screws to attach the wedges, but it was otherwise identical to Norwalk. I'm calling this version 2.7 since 2.6 was at Norwalk and the main change is just the new weapon. Before I start with the fight videos, I have a few quick announcements. First of all, we got Season 5! Bloodsport will officially be returning to compete with yours truly on the team. I'll be in Long Beach for filming alongside Justin Marple and the rest of Team Bots and Stuff, and I plan to be there for nearly every day of filming. If you want to attend the live taping, tickets are available now. Expect a lot more Battlebots preparation content in the coming weeks. Secondly, after meeting a bunch of fans and fellow builders at Motorama, a few of whom were planning to build a bot inspired by Divisten, I've decided to release the full CAD for the current version of the bot and the design for the new weapon up for sale on my web store. Not only will this provide a way for you to help support my channel and help me in the making of these videos, but you'll get something valuable in return. For the bot CAD, feel free to use the parts directly in your own bots, or even clone the whole robot if you really want to, but I hope this will be a learning tool to allow people to see every single design decision that has gone into the robot and aid in designing their own. Links down below. As for the wheel hubs, they worked flawlessly at Motorama. That said, there was hardly any interest from buyers, so I can still sell the ones that I've made already, but I plan to just use them on all of my small robots in the future. Now, on with the fights. Fight 1, Divisten vs. Silent Stopper. I'm going to go in chronological order, which conveniently staggers fights between Divisten and Draconid. First up, I got to fight possibly my #1 fan at the event, Bobby, with his awesome looking wedge bot Silent Stopper. I was a little worried at first by the low forks, but I was pleasantly eyeing that plastic side armor. Let's see how that fight went.
Alright, we got Silent Stopper over there from the way. And we got Divisten over here by the door. Both drivers are ready. We are going to start this. 3, 2, 1, fight. 2 minutes on the clock. After which it goes to the judges. Unless somebody gets blown up or otherwise face plants. Something happens where they can't physically move around the arena.
It's a bad matchup.
Nice little pushing match. Silent Stopper just short enough to not take too much damage directly. Minute 30 remaining. You see some sparks coming off the steel forks in front of Silent Stopper.
Let's go, Seth.
Remaining unless the Divisten can still he eats the floor a couple times. About 50 seconds left in this fight before it goes to the judges. As these robots create hits.
Yeah, I'll give it that. You have to be if you take hits like that. Yeah. Flying, it's like, okay.
4-wheel versus 2-wheel. You can see Division's wheels not touching the floor. 30 seconds left in this fight.
This is not how I wanted this to go.
20 seconds.
Just the worst
Division beats the floor again. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This will be a fun one for the judges.
It's up and down.
Up and down. What do you think? Up and down?
split decision is going to be Divisten.
Yeah, so this one didn't exactly go as planned, though I ultimately did pull off the win. The angle of his forks happened to be extremely shallow, which was kind of a problem. Against most wedges, when my bot is gotten under by the wedge, it'll tip backwards to the point where the weapon hits the floor, and then I just kind of skitter backwards, and eventually I can right myself and come right back. With him, his wedges were at such a low angle that instead of my weapon hitting the floor, he was just able to push me backwards really, really slowly, though his bot didn't have a lot of drive power. You can tell that the top speed of my bot is probably like 2 or 3 times what his is. But unfortunately, my wedges weren't quite low enough to really get under him, even from the side. So my weapon was just kind of grinding away at his side armor for a lot of this match whenever I had the opportunity. Here I did get kind of stuck, but of course my bot is able to self-right at least once per match, it seems. Just like it could at Norwalk with the bar weapon. Obviously it's a little bit easier even with this one than it is with the bar. But yeah, I was a little disappointed to see like I'm just getting like almost no real purchase on his bot because my weapon was spinning fast enough that it would just cleave straight through that plastic side and not actually grab and toss him at all. I really should have tried to go around for the back where he had a metal plate, because then I bet I would have been able to throw him into the ceiling or what have you, but unfortunately, in the heat of battle, that wasn't really what I was thinking of, so I kept making the same error of just like trying to get to the side, thinking he'd be able to turn fast enough to face me if I gave him enough time to do so. And like here, and another time towards the end, I'd drive straight at him from the front, which is really silly. I should have just tried to go around the side again. But, you know, live and learn. Ultimately, didn't lose because he demonstrated superior control, but I demonstrated superior aggression, and he was the only one who received any damage. Here you can see a bit of the damage that I did. I got pretty close to actually nicking areas where the wheels were, but unfortunately, the distance that he was pushed away by my wedges made it so that I couldn't quite reach them. Still, significant damage was done. Also, his dad owns the company that actually made all of the banners and stickers for the robot, so you should check them out. Next up was my hobbyweight fight against Offramp. Offramp is a almost entirely wooden chassis robot with bike tire wheel guards, a sign from a roadside as a wedge, and the sign post using it to attach it to the rest of the bot. Unfortunately, those wheel guards pushed its wheels a bit far away from Draconid's saw, so let's see how this went. Alright, I'm actually going to commentate over this one because I only have the GoPro footage at the moment, which means the audio is a little bit muffled, and also this fight's a bit less action-packed and runs the full 3 minutes. I accidentally knocked the button off of the mount because it was only held on with magnets. So right out of the gate, looks like Draconid's actually driving pretty well, and this is the first time I've ever driven it in a full arena where I actually really had the space to accelerate up to full speed outside of my apartment. I was glad that the saw and the drive both seemed to be working fine, but shortly after doing that, I think I lost some of the carbide teeth on the saw and it became a lot less effective. I also noticed around this time I was starting to have some drive issues. It turns out that the saw arbor, the screw sticking out the bottom of it, I had set the whole height of the saw a bit too low, so that screw was actually touching the ground instead of all 4 of my wheels. So instead I had 3 wheels, and specifically I believe I had both of the wheels on the right side and the back wheel on the left side contacting the ground all the time, and occasionally the left front wheel touching the ground. However, the belt on my back left wheel actually came off, so I only had 3-wheel drive, and that third wheel was touching the ground about half the time. So you can tell that I have a really hard time turning in one direction, but I have a relatively easy time turning in the other direction. So here you can see Offramp's able to kind of push me around, but early on when the saw was still working properly, I kind of nicked and bent the corner of their wedge on the left side of their bot, I guess, looking from the front on their right. So they kept having that kind of dig into the floor every once in a while, and it was giving them drive problems as well, although they seemed to be fully functional for pretty much the duration of the match. I'm really trying to kind of get to the sides here with the saw, but being barely able to turn made that really difficult. I'm not sure exactly why Offramp wasn't able to totally capitalize on my lack of mobility, but for whatever reason, they clearly weren't able to. A bit of a swing and a miss there. Offramp clearly seems to be getting a lot better traction on the floor than I am. I think probably just because of the small surface area of the O-ring tires that I have on my bot and them being instantly caked with sawdust. A combination of those things really not helping out with traction. Aside from the fact that I only had like 2.5 wheels touching the floor to begin with. And that's the end of the match there. Not exactly a decisive winner one way or the other. Ultimately, though, Draconid was declared to be the winner by judge's decision, although I'm sure it was a close one. As you can see, most of the damage I sustained was just losing all the carbide teeth off the saw, so switching to a new saw blade after that one before my next match was pretty much the solution to that problem. Next up, another division fight, this time against a horizontal spinner called Rachet. The name obviously a pun because the weapon of this robot is literally ground out of what used to be a crescent wrench. I thought that this was kind of a joke bot when I first saw it, but it turns out that this bot actually has a storied history, and it's actually fought at Norwalk Havoc before I was there, as well as a few other competitions, and done pretty well. Its weapon actually spins super fast and it's pretty dangerous, plus tool steel is tool steel, so it's pretty hard too. Let's see how this went.
On the far side of the arena, sporting the giant one spinner, asymmetric in shape.
It's all about the spectacle, hon.
Kind of easy to get stuck on your face when you are designed that way.
It's like a little Ferris wheel.
Alrighty. So Rachet over there, are you ready? Division, are you ready? That's 2 bots in the arena, box is locked, 2 minutes on the clock. Let's count it down, 2, 1. Fight, robots, fight.
Oh my god, you put this so
Alright, son. Spinning back up after a first hit. Close to the roof if it wasn't. Rachet seems to have.
Excellent self-fighting technique.
There we go, now we're up to full speed. Oh, Rachet seems to now be hitting full power. But Division did the thing where he gets stuck on his face. And we're back. It takes a lot of torque to roll that thing over, I'll tell you that. But once your battery gets tired, it doesn't like to put out the current, and you get stuck on your face, that's going to be 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that's a knockout. Your winner, Rachet.
So at the start, this was going pretty well for me. I was getting some really big hits in, my robot was working perfectly fine, and after this second hit right here, I disabled a drive side on Rachet. The driver of Rachet, she certainly knew what she was doing though, and she was able to counter my attacks pretty effectively. So the self-riding was working pretty well at the start. I kept trying to attack the back and the vulnerable parts in the middle of their supports where I thought that it would bend and disable the weapon, but unfortunately, with the weapon that has the ability to hit like 270 degrees practically around the front of the robot, it was really hard for me to not get hit at the same time. And every time that I was hitting them and they were hitting me, my bot had the potential of doing stupid stuff like this. At the end here, it turns out what happened was that my motor had vibrated a bit loose, and the strain from that, plus the attempt of self-righting, pushed so much current through the weapon ESC that it actually desoldered one of the phases. So my weapon was completely knocked out at this point. It wasn't just that my battery had run low, it was simply that the weapon was incapable of turning at this point at all. So unfortunately, I got counted out and lost via knockout. So I received two forms of damage. Number one, I forgot to put a screw in the top armor that allowed the balance lead of my battery to stick out, and they cut it off. And number two, that front left wedge mount shattered, but it stayed on the robot. So I think that the new screws actually helped quite a bit, and the alloy 910 filament seems to be decently tough, probably a bit tougher than the nylon I was using before, so that's certainly a win at least. It didn't take very long to repair those things. However, I didn't realize until much later that the weapon motor had come loose, and that came back to bite me in the butt. Next up was Draconid versus twin wedgebots named His and Hers. I believe his was the blue one, and also slightly heavier as I was told as we were loading in, meaning that if I wanted to knock them out, I only had to disable the blue one. Both of these bots touted titanium wedges that I knew my saw wouldn't cut through, but they also had high wheel guards. Let's see how this went. So, leading up to this, I had replaced all of my O-ring belts that drove the wheels with brand new, slightly smaller ones. I also raised the saw a bit so that it was no longer dragging on the ground, meaning that I had proper four-wheel drive traction for this match. Right out of the gate, we're seeing some nice pretty white titanium sparks, and I am definitely in a lot more control, but unfortunately the titanium surfaces of their bots provide a lot worse of a traction material than the floor, so I can't drive off once I get stuck on their wedges, which proved to be problematic a number of times during this. Like I said before, I pretty much want to just go over after the blue wedge, because if I can just kill both of his wheels, then I pretty much won this. Unfortunately, again, pretty early on, because titanium's way harder than the steel even that I was fighting against last time, the carbide on my saw was kind of gone, but the steel remaining behind the carbide teeth was still plenty hard enough to take out some rubber wheels, so I wasn't really concerned by that. And the saw didn't stop spinning at any point during this fight. Oh, actually, no, that's not true. When I got pushed into walls, I sometimes intentionally turned it off, but it didn't get disabled during the fight. So you can see here, I actually found one problem that I have with my UHMW wedge, which is, even though it's hinged and extremely low to the ground, because their titanium wedges are so much harder, instead of me being able to actually get under them, especially because their angle is so much lower than mine, their wedges were just biting into the plastic, so we kind of were like colliding with each other, wedge on wedge, even though in theory, if my wedge was harder, I would have just won the ground game and gotten underneath them. So driving backwards wasn't going to be a particularly useful strategy in this fight. Here you can see I got to the side a little bit, but a little bit too far towards the front to actually take out a wheel there. Here I thought I got a nice few bites out of the wheel though. Sorry about this action being in the far corner that you can't see. So I was starting to realize as long as I got some speed, whenever I hit them from the front, I could just jump over them and get behind them instead of just getting pushed around. So I tried to avoid being really slow whenever I was near their fronts from here on in. And here you can see during the last 10-second countdown is the first time that I got some really, really good purchase on attacking a wheel on the blue guy. And at the very last second, the pulley that held on my saw, or that was powering the saw, actually popped off because it had decided to work its way through the screw that was holding it down, but that's easily solved with just adding a washer later on. So following this match, I met up with the team, and it turned out that I actually did very nearly cut all the way through one of the wheels. They actually had to saw the wheel off because it was jammed on. So the like 90-degree cut that you can see in this last photo here was done by them and not by the robot, but still, I thought that was pretty impressive damage given how little contact time Draconid had with their wheels. Alright, so now I had to fight Xenocide with Divisten. For those that don't know, Xenocide is a book from the Ender's Game series. I actually read it, it's quite good. Unfortunately, his drive wasn't working, and also I didn't realize it at the time, but my weapon wasn't working when we first loaded in. Fortunately for me, his drive problem was significantly more noticeable, so he ended up actually postponing the match, which meant that I had 20 minutes to bring Divisten back to the pit table, at which point I noticed that my weapon motor was no longer screwed to the upright, and that the weapon ESC had desoldered one of the phases, so I quickly swapped to a new weapon ESC, and upon attempting to take the weapon pulley off to actually tighten the screws in the motor, I found out that the set screw was like not moving whatsoever, so I basically just had to run with it. I put on the disc to hope that I wouldn't have to self-right.
Two vertical spinners in this match. One quite a bit larger than the other. A large vertical orange spinner of Divisten against the smaller Xenocide. Looks like they've picked some sides. They're gonna hit some buttons. Let us know they're ready. There's one. There's two. 2 minutes. 2 bats. 3, 2, 1. Fight, robots, fight. Both spun out. That's a good sign. Divisten looks to be stuck on his back. Oh, what gracious professionalism from Xenocide. Let's see if it bites him. Oh, pretty stuck there. Looks like Xenocide is going to hold back. I'm going to have to start a countdown. 10, we taps out to save the time. Your winner, Xenocide. Good use of a postponement there.
Yeah, so basically I made two really big mistakes here. Number one, I didn't prioritize actually checking what was wrong with Divisten after So Rachet, which is what ultimately screwed me here, because I actually had like more than an hour and a half, I think, during which I could have easily fixed all the problems that I had. And number two, because I hadn't done that, I had like the motor screws super loose, so there was zero belt tension on the weapon. I knew it would spin up, but there's no torque behind it whatsoever, so self-righting was completely out of the question. So really, I should have asked for my 20-minute postponement to actually go and fix these issues, but I assumed that Xenocide would not really be working. I didn't realize his weapon was even working, and I had thought that there was a chance he might still not be ready in time and might forfeit the match, and then I'd be able to go fix all my problems, but sadly for me, that wasn't the case, and his bot worked just fine, so I got completely screwed over by my own poor planning and was therefore eliminated from the Beetleweight tournament. So that last fight concluded day 1, and now this is day 2 of the competition, so I actually have stream footage for this one. Next, Draconid had to fight a plastic wedged bot named Speed Bump, and you can probably guess what the name is from. So Speed Bump used a UHMW wedge in the front and back, and it was a steel chassis with some hard rubber wheels that I might have just been able to get to if I could only get to the side of the thing. This was going to be a tough fight for sure, because the driver of Speed Bump is also the driver of the Battlebot Valkyrie, and he's definitely pretty good. So let's see how this one went.
Let's get some robots in the box here. In the blue square, we have the Speed Bump looking robot with the name of Speed Bump. Are you ready? Speed bump is ready. Dracon in the red square, are you ready? Dracon is ready. Drivers, you have 3 minutes. Dracon wielding a saw blade on the front, hoping to maybe chop the speed bump down to size. Speed bump wanting nothing more than to slam Dracon into the wall repeatedly, breaking itself.
I don't know if they're stuck. I mean, that saw blade just went into some soft rubber there. Yeah, we're going to call them stuck. We're going to pause the match, please. Oh, never mind. They're good.
Psych, just kidding.
Just hit the 3 and go.
They were just in a lover's embrace is all.
You get an extra bonus 2 seconds.
I, for one, think that Dracon should use speed bump as a ramp and maybe launch itself into the Lexan. I think that would be fairly entertaining.
That saw blade's nice and quiet.
It is. It does seem to be inflicting a little bit of damage on the front of speed bump as well. No major amount, but enough to ruin the paint job.
Wedge get underneath there in the corner. Are they stuck? Nope, he just pinning them. Remember, you can't pin them forever here.
10 seconds for your pin as you smash him into the wall repeatedly. Show him that corner and that corner. Take him to the other corner. I believe speed bump has a significant weight disadvantage too. I want to say they weighed about 9 pounds out of the 12 available.
But it's one torquey boy there. Able to push around its heavier opponent.
Speed bump not giving Dracon room to breathe there. Staying on him like white on rice.
1 minute left.
Or like tomato on pie, as the Pennsylvania Dutch do, I guess. Drivers coming down to 30 seconds, drivers. 30 seconds, make your move. Speed bump slamming Dracon into the wall one more time. Dracon continuing to scrape away at the bump of speed bump. How much material does he have left? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Match over, drivers. Match over.
Nice driving, guys.
Well done.
Judge's decision is in your winner, the Wedge of Speed Bump.
Yeah, so this match didn't really go my way, and I wasn't surprised that I was outdriven, but like, still it was kind of disappointing, obviously, to lose with just one win for each bot at this event. It wasn't my strongest showing, especially for Division, but Division really got killed by me not preparing properly. Draconid was simply outdriven completely in this fight, and in the fight against his and hers as well, but less clearly, I think, in the his and hers fight than with this one. At the end of all three of my fights, the saw came a bit loose from the arbor, which I think is down to not using a proper spring washer retention system for it, and that's something that's definitely going to be remedied before the next time that Draconid fights, but I was definitely getting some pretty good cuts in at the beginning of this match, and doing some significant damage still throughout to the front wedge of Speed Bump here. So I wouldn't say the saw is completely ineffective, but just the geometry of this design made it quite difficult for me to really get to the wheels, and they could turn really, really easily, face me all the time, and definitely were effective in doing so, which made it so that there was little to nothing that I could really reasonably do to counter. Without a lot more traction, there wasn't really a good way for me to maneuver well enough. Especially with four-wheel drive, you can't turn quite as fast. So, yeah, it is what it is. But I do think Draconid has some potential, and I'm hoping to fight it in the future at future Norwalk Havoc events. I don't know for sure if I can come to the very next Norwalk Havoc event, because it's going to depend on how much my involvement with Battlebots is going to interfere with it. But hopefully, if things are going to plan, I will be doing some more machining for Team Bloodsport, and that will definitely be on this channel in the near future. So stay tuned for some more of that content, and I will be sharing all of the progress that I am able to and allowed to with you guys. If I can, in fact, take enough time off from battlebotting to actually show up at the Norwalk event in March, I'll be bringing both Draconid and Divisten, because I actually emailed the event organizers of Norwalk and was given express permission that Draconid can fight there despite the no spinner bots in the 12-pound rule, since it's not a kinetic energy weapon that will actually, you know, destroy the arena, which is the real reason that that rule is in place in the first place. I would really love to see what Draconid Saw does against Woody, because I think that would be hilarious. Anyway, Divisten will certainly be coming then as well, if I can make it. So remember, kids, actually check to make sure your bot works after each fight and fix all the problems that you see. That was probably my main takeaway here. Divisten still has some reliability kinks to work out, but they're not as clear-cut as before, so hopefully it'll be back better than ever at the next event. Don't forget to subscribe for more of this content. Also follow Team Bloodsport on their Facebook and Instagram pages, which I'll link down below, as well as my own Instagram page, which you can find down below as well. Thanks for watching!